Welcome, everybody. Excited you're joining us today. Okay, I think we'll now get started. My name is Cordel Faulk, and I am the Director of Global Admissions for the Schwarzman Scholars Program. I'd like to welcome everyone today for our webinar on how Schwarzman Scholars has been a trajectory-changing experience for our scholar alumni. We'll begin today with some introductions and conversation with a few of our scholars from the class of 2019, and then we'll pose a few questions from the audience to our scholars. It's an honor today to be co-hosting today's webinar with Amy Stursberg, the CEO of Schwarzman Scholars. So now I'll turn it over to her for a welcome to our guests today.
Thanks so much, Cordel, and thank you all of you for joining today. And a special thank you to our three panel members today, three people from the class of 2019 Schwarzman Scholars. I'm hailing from Montana today on my vacation, but I could not show up for this because this is really a panel that I think if you're considering Schwarzman Scholars or interested in what the program is, there's no better way to understand the experience that you will and can have, but hearing it from a variety of scholars from different backgrounds, different interests, different sort of career interests. And so I'm really looking forward to that. I'm really excited to be here today. So let me just say, I've been working on this program when it was just a thought of Steve Schwarzman's. He literally woke up one day and had this idea to create what became Schwarzman Scholars. And it's been a wild and crazy journey for Steve, for myself, and for the staff, for the scholars, for our partners at Tsinghua University. But the journey has been amazing. And I think that, you know, what I want to say today is, for me, the journey has been transformative personally and professionally. There's been the unexpected, the frustrating, the magical, and all of that wrapped into one has just been the last 10 years of my life working on Schwarzman Scholars 24/7 has been nothing but full of surprises. And so I want to turn it over for you to hear from the alums, for them to talk about some of the expected and unexpected surprises and the journeys that they were on before they were Schwarzman Scholars, and how that journey was impacted by going to spend a year in China as a Schwarzman Scholar. And so with that, I'm going to popcorn it over to Namit. Why don't you get started, Namit?
Hi, thanks, Amy. Hello, everyone. Just a brief introduction. I'm Namit. As a member of the third cohort. I'm a physician by training. Worked and studied across United States, China, Thailand, went to Johns Hopkins, and then got my degree in public health from Harvard. And after pursuing my postdoc, moved to China as a Schwarzman Scholar. Happy to give you, do I popcorn it over to Matt for his introduction?
Go for it, Matt, go for it.
Hi, everyone. My name is Matt. Like Namit Noliemi, I'm also a 2019 Schwarzman Scholar. I was born and raised in Wisconsin in the US. And for college, I popped down to the University of Texas at Dallas, where I studied mathematics and economics. Prior to joining the Schwarzman Scholars program, I was really interested in environmental economics and the economics of climate change. And that's why Schwarzman Scholars was a natural next step in my career, because if you want to work on climate policy, it's a good idea to know a thing or two about China. But when I arrived in Schwarzman College, my career plans changed a little bit, and I'm looking forward to sharing a bit more about that and how I went from climate policy to athletics. And yeah, excited to share a bit more.
Very good. Well, Amy, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself?
Of course. Welcome, everyone. Very happy that you guys can join us for today's panel. My name's Oluyemi. I'm based here in London, United Kingdom. I went to university at Oxford, where I was studying philosophy, politics, and economics. Immediately after, I came to China on the Schwarzman Scholarship, and it was, I don't say this lightly, one of the best years of my life. And I hope I can share the many reasons why that is the case on this panel with you guys.
Well, Matt, you kind of dared us to dive into asking you How did you wind up making the switch from climate change policy to athletics? What's the journey?
So sports has always been the thing that has excited me most in my life. Just getting out of bed in the morning, that was what I wanted to do more than anything. But I viewed that interest, I guess, as a little bit more childish. And if I wanted to be a serious adult pursuing a serious career, I thought the economics, climate change, these types of things made for more of that serious adult career path. But there was one particular conversation I had with Kevin Rudd in the pub at Schwarzman Scholars. And Kevin Rudd, for those of you who don't know, he's a former Prime Minister of Australia. And he was very involved in the Conference of the Parties in 2009 at Copenhagen. He's been very involved in climate change work. So I was really excited to meet him and hear a lot of his talks on climate change. But during a 30-minute one-on-one conversation that I got to have with him, which that on its own is kind of mind-blowing, that opportunity, we talked about his time working with the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, but then we also talked about his interactions with the International Olympic Committee and his interactions with FIFA and his interactions with other sporting bodies. And one of the takeaways from that conversation for me was that what happens in sports, especially at the international level, actually really matters. It's really significant. It impacts millions, if not billions, of people's lives. And it has consequences for sustainability and environmentalism. It has consequences for social rights and all types of things. And so that conversation, I guess, allowed me to dream a bit more about what a career path would look like. So I'm currently pursuing speed skating. I'm training for the Olympic trials, which are here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in 5 months. And I gave myself permission to do that because I could see how a career as an athlete could be parlayed into a successful career, as not just a coach in athletics, but as an administrator, as someone helping to lead international sporting bodies forward in the 21st century. And I can't overstate the impact of that conversation with Kevin Rudd on my own thinking about how my career could still connect to really important international issues while I pursue sports.
Very good, man. That's an interesting line of thinking. Olayemi, could you talk to us some about how Schwarzman Scholars affected you in expected ways, but also in unexpected ways?
I think in expected ways, I knew that I was going to be joining a group of people who were as ambitious, if not more ambitious than I was. And I knew that I was going to join a group of people who weren't scared to, as Matt said, dream big. And I was really excited about that opportunity. While I was actually at Schwarzman, I worked closely with a scholar from the cohort above who started the Kente and Silk initiative here in Beijing, where they would host an annual Africa Week, where they would dedicate live events to learning about the African culture and connect with African diaspora that were living in China at the time. While here also, I connected with loads of people. So I'm working in finance currently, but I connected with loads of people who had kind of similar inspirations, aspirations to work in the industry, but we were all looking at it from fairly different angles. So having grown up in Nigeria for a number of years, I was really interested in kind of emerging markets investing, specifically investing on the sub-Saharan subcontinent. And kind of after doing Schwarzman, after speaking to all these people, I came back to the UK after a number of stints in investment banking, pursued a full-time role at Soros Economic Development Fund, which is an impact investing fund based here and in New York. And there I worked on a number of incredible deals. During the COVID period, we invested in a company that was building vaccine manufacturing capacity on the African continent. We invested in companies that were formalizing the relationships between domestic workers and the households that they were working with. And I think taking a chance and kind of deviating a little bit from what I thought was a traditional finance career, I imagined for myself, only happened because of Schwarzman and because I could bounce my ideas off my friends and my close peers. So that's kind of expected ways that I expected kind of things I had at Schwarzman. On the unexpected side, I think the sense of community and the friendship that I built, it's kind of unimaginable. I don't think there's another kind of melting pot of such diverse people with such diverse experiences who are all equally keen to know each other and kind of learn about each other's experiences and just do random things together. So Matt here, and as you can get a sense of, was really great with kind of sports. And he actually coached our women's football team during the college. And so he took this, novice, never played football ever, to scoring my first goal in my first game, which was amazing. It's incredible. And not only did that kind of like football experience give me a chance to connect with people in my cohort, it also allowed me to connect with people in the wider Tsinghua community as we, competed against different departments and whatnot. Also, while at Schwarzman, I participated in Chaguan, and Chaguan is a kind of debating society that's specific to Schwarzman Scholars. There is no kind of external influence or even attendance. Faculty members don't attend. No other Schwarzman members attend. It's just the scholars. And there we debated pretty much anything and everything that was of interest to us at that time. I remember I had developed a little bit of kind of stage fright during my university years, and one of my cohort members, Arjun, really, pleaded with me and encouraged me to do a debate. And I ended up speaking on kind of the correlation between economic development and how that would maybe manifest in China starting a democracy sometime soon. But yeah, these are just some of the kind of experiences that I was able to take part in by being there that I didn't expect, but was just so grateful that I did have.
That's fantastic. Thank you. So Namit, I guess we'll ask you the same question. How did the program affect you in expected but also unexpected ways?
So I'll go with the unexpected first, right? I think on the unexpected front, I was a trained surgeon who is now in finance. That was on the professional front, and a lot of that decision making happened within the four walls of that Schwarzman College. I remember sitting with Amy over cups and cups of coffee, trying to figure out whether or not I should take those risks. And the best advice that she's ever given me is just jump in and you'll learn to swim. So that, but also a lot of my friends, right? It's such an incredible place where you have these amazing people who are very accomplished in their different fields. But I think what brings them together is this sense of having dreams that are bigger than themselves, right? And that could be, making more money than you did one day before, or that could be, trying to end hunger in some corners of the world. And I feel like for me, it literally just opened those doors, right? As someone who's been, within the medical community, I always, just looked at streets in a certain way. And the program really helped me open up that thinking, right? I would have conversations with someone who worked in finance and, understand how it would look as a career. At the same point in time, Ruby, who is a very close friend and also a fellow physician, both of us would sit down and discuss whether going back to clinical medicine was a better choice. So on the professional front, it was a lot of, mentorship, but also a lot of these very important conversations that in some ways, like Oliami mentioned, right? Like it pushed you to go out and take those risks. On a lighter note, Oliami scored her first goal. I had two left feet and I wouldn't be able to dance if it were not for Oliami, right? I remember, our Halloween party and, dancing on the forum till, we were asked to go back to our rooms. But I've learned so much from the program in unexpected ways, learning about China, having those important conversations around, how it is like to be there and, understand it from a, so to say, understanding it by being on ground. You can read all the books in the world, but you spend a day at the college and I think you'll learn a lot more. That was in unexpected ways. On the expected front, I knew what I was signing up for. It was an opportunity to be in China, understand its evolving role in the world, and, learn from this diverse faculty, interact with a diverse set of students. On the faculty front, I remember, we had classes on public health response with Professor Ann Howitt, and, Chief Joey Pfeiffer had come in. He was, the deputy fire commissioner when the 9/11 happened. So understanding, how you would react to these situations. And a lot of it played onto my real life. Last year, I was back working on the front lines. And when I was sitting on the advisory committee with the government, we figured out, how to cater to surge response, for example. how would we sit down and set up war rooms? So in unexpected ways, I feel like it just gave me the strength to think out of the box, but also, made me more capable of doing it, both academically and, personally.
So Cordel, let me just jump in because I would love to hear from any of the three of you about sort of the net, you talk, which warms my heart, about the impact of the community, of the scholar community. And Matt, your conversation with Kevin Rudd, who's one of my favorite people and been instrumental in building this program as well. But talking a little bit about your network outside of the college, right? Whether it was speakers that came in or your mentors or that you did an internship, but sort of that larger network that you had access to, and how, whether it's anecdotally or just generally, how that is also a big part of the program. Because I think that's really important. The reason this program was set up as with a partnership with Tsinghua was to give the scholars access to things that they otherwise wouldn't have access to in China. And so I think it's really important to touch on how that, Kevin Rudd actually being a great example, right, as being one of the top China scholars in the world, but also in terms of actually living in China and experience of China. Matt?
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to talk a little bit more about the guest speakers that you had brought up, Amy, and how that also impacted me personally. That it wasn't any one, there were some interactions like the one with Kevin Rudd where it was one speaker one day, like, oh, that changed a paradigm in my mind. But there was something else that happened. It was a longer, slower process over the entire year, which is that at Schwarzman College, there's a nearly nonstop buffet of extremely interesting, extremely successful people from every field you can imagine. And what that forced me to do individually was to stop asking myself the question, oh, like, what could I be successful at? And framing my career path in that mind, if I should choose something that I'll be good at. And it forced me to start thinking, okay, if I'm successful at the highest level, and that, what would my life look like? And is that something I actually really want and really want to be happy with? Because again, you see crazy successful people all the time at Schwarzman College. You see them in their 30s, their 40s, and also in their 70s and 80s. And again, over the year, day in, day out, it changed the questions that I was asking myself. And that helped me really discover what it was that I wanted to do, rather than trying to figure out what I should do in any sense of the word should. And then, Amy also talked about just the importance of living in China. I think Naman talked about the importance of that, the boots on the ground feel. One of the takeaways for myself, which I didn't expect to be a takeaway, was that I realized I actually probably didn't want to live full time in China in the short term. I loved my year there. It was incredible. I learned a ton, but I guess for the next step in my career, I realized I probably wanted to be back home in the States, and I wanted to visit China, 1 or 2 weeks at a time on work endeavors. I realized that was the better fit for me. And I never could have known that without the experience at Schwarzman Scholars. Otherwise, I could have been deluding myself into thinking that it could have been a good fit to move there permanently, and just realized that wasn't the right thing for me at this time.
So if you win the Olympics for speed skating, or when you win the Olympics for speed skating, you'll give credit to Schwarzman Scholars, I hope.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Oh, I mean, I can go next, in terms of, diving deeper into what Amy mentioned, in terms of the larger network. So my mentor at Schwarzman was Deng Feng, who is a very, very successful venture capitalist based out of China. And so, from my conversations with him, I always wanted to explore. Always wanted to explore beyond the four walls of the hospital. And, my interactions with him led me into an internship with Northern Light Venture Capital, which is one of China's biggest VC funds. And turns out that they were really interested in moving to India and exploring India from an investment perspective, but also from a market perspective. And that eventually converted into a full-time offer to work and lead their India and emerging economies expansion. So, that was with Fung. Eventually, I was also very close to joining Blackstone. And I remember, I reached out to Amy, getting some guidance on it. And again, that network helped me, get a foot in the door and then undergo that entire process. But to understand what that process would look like and, what that career trajectory would look like over a meal was really an out of the world experience for me. And finally, my current role too came in from the Schwarzman Scholars, group. A very close friend of mine, Mandy, posted it. And she was like, well, this American company is looking for someone to lead India and Asia Pacific. They're having a really tough time. They want someone with a background in medicine, but also in public policy and finance. And, I'm here now. So I can't stress enough the importance of, those networks. And to be very honest, those are not really your networks. Those are your mentors. Those are your friends. And you don't look at them from a networking perspective, right? You look at them from, I need guidance and can you help me out? And they will usually, open the doors for you.
So Cordel, let me just jump in quickly with one. I know we want to get to questions and I see there are a lot of questions there, but one other thing that I think is really important for some of you or one of you to talk about is the Alumni Network, right? Because the vision and the mission of the program was twofold. It was to identify, very simple, identify the future leaders of the world in all disciplines from all over the world, bring them to China to better understand China and have China better understand the rest of the world and, become a bridge. But the other part was to create this network of future leaders who, Steve used to say in 20 years or 50 years or 100 years, you could pick up the phone, Matt, and call Oluyemi if she's the president of Nigeria or whatever, and that there would be this network that was created. And the program works very hard to create this network and to support the network, but the network really comes from the scholars themselves, keeping connected. And, Namit, you said that you have obviously gotten this job this job connection through an alumni, but really talking about how the alumni network is important and what it's done for you, not just individually, but as a group, as a network.
I wouldn't mind starting on this one actually. So being based in London, there's actually quite a hub here and there are quite a few alumni that are based here as well. And I think one of the things about the program is that not only kind of within each cohort, but also between each cohorts, there's a really, really strong kind of affinity and connection with people. You could have had one conversation from somebody 2 cohorts before you, but because you've both experienced the Schwarzman Scholarship in some capacity, there's already kind of this desire to help in any way you can. I've traveled to so many places. I've had friends that have traveled to many places or have moved countries. And I've always called on kind of the alumni community or my friends within the program who can, kind of lend a helping hand, tell us where to go. Is this a good company to work for? Is this a good city to live in? Like something as simple as that, but it's just a kind of family where you feel safe and you feel supported and you feel that you can always get guidance on whatever it is that you're looking for. And I think that's largely formed intra-year from the cohorts that we do, from the activities that we do within the cohort. So like I mentioned, football, whatever. We also had like kind of social events like prom, day parties, hiking, that sort of thing. But also kind of between cohorts, there's a lot of really good alumni programming that's been happening where we have talks with, let's say, think tanks or other kind of interesting people, and we connect between the cohorts talking about whatever it is on the agenda for today. And yeah, it just, the sense of community here is so strong. And I know that I think I've probably only experienced it for 3 years since I've left Schwarzman, but I can only imagine what it will look like in 10 to 15 years time. I'm quite excited that I get to watch it grow all that way. But yeah, I think it's amazing.
I can go next. There's this line that I always say, which is, if today's bar crawls and pub crawls can be tomorrow's state dinners, this world will be a much better place. And to be honest, the program has done that for me, right? People as friends. And no matter where they reach, they will always continue being your friends. And, if I talk about the community, on the professional front, when I first dived into finance, I was making calls to one of my best friends, Joe and Andrew, trying to get their guidance on, hey, I don't understand this financial model. Can you help me out? I remember a time when I was supposed to present and one of my friends literally sat down for 5 hours and finished my entire presentation saying, hey, I've revamped this, go for it. So I feel like that sense of belonging to the program is so strong, and the sense of being there for each other. It's very difficult to express in words. And I truly believe that people are the most important asset of this program. It's funny because just 2 days ago, I was with, one of the scholars from the most recent cohort, which is the 2021 cohort. And we're just talking about, life in general, guiding each other, taking inputs. And now whenever, you're in different cities in India, you'd always, drop in a note on your local Schwarzman group saying, hey, I'm in town, and most likely you'll see 5 or 6 scholars coming in and having wonderful discussions, about life in general. So I think people are the best part about the program, and this community is strong, it's growing, and it's we call it the Schwartz fam.
Yeah, I would really echo what Olayemi and Namit both said about the warmth of the community. And warm community feels a lot more accurate than even the words professional network. That people are just there for you. When it can be as simple as when you're having a rough day. If I'm having a tough day at training, things didn't go my way, I feel like I'm not making progress, I'm just kind of down. There's at least a dozen people from my cohort. I'll call them up and we'll just talk on the phone. It can be for 5 minutes or it can be for an hour. And then they help me reframe what I'm going through and just maybe help me get my motivation back, things like that. So those really personal interactions are also extremely important in addition to the professional network sides. And then one super short story on the professional network side was I expected to meet people at Schwarzman College who would maybe introduce me to interesting professional connections, lead to future jobs. But what I didn't expect was that one of my classmates and closest friends at Schwarzman actually introduced me to my speed skating coach, that her dad's best friend from college happened to be a 4-time Winter Olympian, and she had coached a bunch of Olympic speed skaters, and she was a previous world record holder herself. And she never would have taken me on as an athlete that she was coaching if it wasn't for the very personal connection that she had with my classmate at Schwarzman College. So the doors that will be opened at Schwarzman College are unpredictable and can lead in any direction imaginable.
And let me just ask one more question, Cordel, before you go to Q&As. Can one of you or all of you talk about sort of the Chinese scholars? 20% of your class are Chinese scholars, and the role that the Chinese scholars play in terms of being ambassadors to their country, as well as giving you an opportunity to really understand China in a deep and meaningful way.
I can start with that. I mean, on the kind of first obvious level was actually learning the language, Chinese. So I know I saw Namit many a time in the forums working on his Chinese homework, and I can attest that it was always very helpful to have the Chinese scholars around just to kind of hear our elementary Chinese and whatnot. But also the Chinese scholars were really incredible in just kind of showing us what Chinese people did for fun, and kind of the social things that they did. So we got introduced to, KTV, hot pot, touring really interesting historical sites that I actually would never have been exposed to if I had never kind of connected with the Chinese scholars in that way. And even when we went on, let's say, deep dives, I think that kind of similar 20% Chinese cohort remained in the deep dives as well. And they always provided a level of insight that I don't think you could get just from, an amazing tour guide or, someone else in the program who studied a lot about China. But these are, the scholars have lived there. This is their home. So I think kind of, the learning opportunities from being with them are just, immense.
Yeah.
And Nami, just say before you start, Namit, just say what your deep dive, sorry to interrupt, but I think it's important for this audience to hear each one of you just say which deep dive you went on, which is really kind of a signature part of our program, and where you went.
Of course. So on the formal deep dives, so which are the ones organized by Schwarzman College, I went to Xiamen, which was a province in China, and spent around 4 or 5 days there. And while we were there, we connected with really interesting companies. One of them, I think on my deep dive, was Anta, which is essentially the Nike equivalent in China. And we, connected with the leadership there, heard about kind of the business prospects and things that were going on in that specific company, but also we connected with a number of kind of research organizations, government bodies who were telling us about the specific work that was going on in that area. So just to summarize, the deep dives are just an opportunity to learn very deeply about a specific area in China on a specific topic or whatnot. But in addition to the formal deep dives, there often actually were more informal deep dives that extended not to just kind of beyond Beijing, but also beyond China and kind of the rest of the world. I'm pretty sure Namit can maybe share a bit more about his experience taking the scholars to India. But even kind of within China, lots of the Chinese scholars were very open, kind of sharing their kind of hotspots with us. I remember I went on a deep dive to Datong, and this is a place that I would have never heard about or encountered if I didn't have that cohort of people to kind of introduce me. But yeah, can pass on to Namit.
Well, I mean, Oliami had better Chinese skills than I did. So I definitely owe it to all my Chinese scholar friends for helping me order my food, making sure I get my pronunciations right, sometimes helping me for my homework. But I would literally say, I think, to name a few, Bobo, Eric, Junyan, Han, like all of them literally gave me a very nice, deep dive into what it feels like to live a day-to-day life in China, right? I remember going to this Chinese version of Hollywood in Hangdian with Bobo because the owner knew them really well. And, we got to see different places there. With Han, we were supposed to go to his wedding, understand how, Chinese, culture works. And, I would end up at these dinners where I'm a vegetarian. And so they would find places for me to go where, Buddhist monks would cook vegetarian food and things like that. So it was really like a fantastic, so to say, deep dive within China. And I mean, those are friends, right? I had the opportunity to host about 35 of them here in India. And this one line that I always say, we went to this really, really small village, which was, where Mahatma Gandhi started his movement. And the villagers had come for interactions around how to understand, to give them a better understanding of India at a grassroots level. And, when our session got over, I thanked all of them for their time. And this very kind lady said this very beautiful line in Marathi, which translates into, we can't travel the world, but you brought the world to us. And so, that's really what the program did for me. My deep dive in China was in Chengdu, and I was just blown away by the medical facilities they had there. They had this, Chengdu medical research lab, so to say, where they were using AI in healthcare. And I was just blown away with the kind of research they were doing there. We had lots of meetings, with government officials, with, local people. And a lot of times our Chinese scholars' friends would join us, and also they were from that particular area. So they would give us an even deeper understanding of that place. So I just feel like, the Chinese scholars helped make China home away from home. Over to you, Matt.
Yeah. Another thing that I really appreciated about the Chinese scholars was they kept me humble, and I felt like they kept a lot of my classmates humble, because Schwarzman Scholars is full of people who are smart and who are quite confident in themselves and often in their opinions. And there's no substitute for having lived in China. So no matter how many books you've read, how many articles you've read, you show up, you think you know about a particular issue. And then if you start having a conversation with one of the Chinese scholars and they're like, well, where'd you hear this? I'm like, oh, I read this article in the New York Times and I think I'm smart saying that. And I've got it. And then they hit me back with, okay, does that really capture the full breadth and nuance of what's going on here? Like, just pause and check yourself, Matt. And that was one of the best parts of being friends with them. And I just really, really appreciated it. Then on the deep dive side, like Oliami, I went to Xiamen. and thought that was a wonderful experience. And again, one of the highlights was probably meeting with the executives at Anta, which is China's version of Nike. And then some of the smaller trips around China, like the one to Datong, like ones to, I mean, almost half the provinces in China, we probably had mini deep dives too, that not everybody in the program went on, but that if it fit your schedule and it fit your interest area, you could go and you could learn about a local place in China from people who can actually teach you something about it rather than, you know, reading a Western tourist guidebook or something of the like. So just overall fantastic.
That's great. Thank you, guys. We'll now head into a few questions from the audience. And Namit, we have one for you, so why don't we start there? So somebody wanted to know, how did this experience in China help to further shape your career in public health, or your understanding in public
health? Can you go again?
Yeah, so they want to know how your experience in China helped to further your career in public health, your understanding of public health.
So, you know, for example, when India was, you know, fighting COVID-19, fortunately, China was already out of its first wave. And so, you know, I would interact with a lot of my friends to understand, you know, what did China do right at that stage? One of the things that China was doing was Alibaba came with an app, which would tag you as, you know, green, yellow, or red. And eventually, India adopted an idea similar to that through our Arogya Setu app, wherein, you know, if you were entering a train station or an airport, you would have to flash your cell phone. So that was first. Secondly, like I mentioned, you know, we had some beautiful classes. So, you know, Professor Havitt took a class on leading in the time of crises and disasters, which literally prepared me for a pandemic, to how to cater to surge response, right? Like, how do you, we studied the SARS epidemic that, you know, happened in Hong Kong, and what lessons did China learn from it and what were they doing right? And then we could take in small snippets. Also, one of the nicest professor that I met was Professor Unni Karunakara, who was, you know, the former chairman or president of Doctors Without Borders or Medicine Sans Frontiers. And he would share his experience of, you know, being out there in the field and, you know, setting up these camps in the middle of a war zone, and the kind of process flows and, you know, mapping that he would do. And all of that, you know, literally helped me think through when I was working, you know, on India's COVID-19 response. So I think that was one particular way. And very briefly, you know, I think also the Schwarzman Scholars program helped me understand how to manage finances, right? Public health response is one thing, but how do you manage resources and limited resources to maximize your outputs? And I feel like, you know, these real ground experiences from all of these professors helped me incorporate that into my day-to-day life.
Very good, very good. I mean, this is a really interesting question for everybody. How did your conception of leadership change through interacting with other scholars and guest speakers during the program? Matt, would you like to start there?
Yeah, happy to jump in. So one of the things that I guess was really highlighted for me or changed was a deeper appreciation for how much of leadership happens behind the scenes for people who aren't necessarily front and center on the stage with the spotlight on them, but who are very much the ones who make things happen and are getting all the people on board who need to get on board in order to take any type of endeavor from point A to point B. And obviously I knew some of that before the year at Schwarzman Scholars. You know, everyone I think knows that to some extent, but hearing stories from people day in and day out, week in and week out, just really, really hammered that point home that you can have tremendous influence and tremendous impact working on stuff behind the scenes in addition to working on stuff that's in the spotlight. And there's not one that's better than the other.
Very good. Olayemi, do you have any thoughts?
Yes, I do. I think for similar to Matt, there's a lot of stuff that goes on when you're not front and center. And I think I learned that especially in my leadership classes and through a lot of the case studies that we worked on. But I also thought that a really interesting way that I kind of thought about leadership while I was there was in terms of kind of thought leadership or kind of knowledge leadership, if you want to say it that way, which was every single person who was at Schwarzman had a very unique background and set of experiences, and being able to communicate that with the rest of your classmates was leadership in a way, because you were essentially being a platform for that set of background or experiences that you have. And, you know, people shared their experiences, be that at the lunch table or through what they called Steve's briefs. So I remember Steve's briefs were essentially kind of informal presentations that some of the students gave on random topics. Some people gave topics on kind of jazz music or on Black natural hair or on Colombia and the tourist kind of market there. And this, I think, is leadership, because you are opening a whole new world to people who have never encountered it before, and you're doing it well, and you have to work to do it. And yeah, so yeah, I'd say that.
Well, for me, I think Schwarzman was really a very humbling experience, so to say, right? Like you come in from, you know, I often say this, a lot of the institutions that we've been to, you know, are very well defined. And this is a place that's yet to be defined. And a lot of the, you know, so to say, as Amy calls us, future global leaders, all of them are sitting in the room with you there. And so you realize that, you know, whatever you might have achieved is really a very small fraction of what the world looks like, right? So it opens your eyes and ears to people who are better than you, and also challenges the status quo, right? It challenges the ideas that you came in with, and gives you this sense of, you know, direction, saying, oh, you know, I always thought, you know, A plus B was C, but now you're someone who's challenging that and proving you wrong, saying, you know, A plus B is actually D. And so those important conversations, right, were a part of, so to say, the leadership journey. And they really, really helped me define the person I am today.
Very good.
So I just wanted to add one last point, which was, I think we've said a lot of times over this conversation that there were a lot of conversations that were had. And I think one of the incredible things about Schwarzman was that it genuinely was a safe space to have these kind of challenging conversations. Matt mentioned that, you know, he felt humbled by his Chinese scholars. Namit has explained that he felt that sometimes his initial thoughts or preconceived notions were challenged also. And the thing about Schwarzman was that you could have those discussions with your best friend in a common room, or you could have it at a formal debate, but you would always kind of leave the conversation having truly learned something and having felt that you did it in a safe space. Yeah.
Very good. So, we have a really interesting question about career, and Amy, you may want to jump in on this too. But it's somebody who wrote, I'm currently an engagement manager at a Big Four consulting firm, and wanted to get the panelist perspective on Schwarzman Scholars' ability to accelerate an already successful corporate career. So if you have any personal thoughts on that, or so things you've seen from fellow scholars and alumni that might be helpful to share.
I'll jump in first before I let these characters jump in. You think about the unexpected. There's nothing we can tell you about how to accelerate your career. The unexpected is going to happen. I remember, I just want to tell a quick story about a scholar, I think might have been in your third cohort, the three of you. And she had a very successful career in finance. And she came in, and her first day, I happened to be at the college and happened to see her and sit down next to her. And she told me about, you know, she wanted to get from A to Z in that year. She had the whole thing mapped out, what she was in finance, and she was going to get from A to Z. And I said to her, take a deep breath, get rid of all those thoughts about how you want to accelerate your career, and let Schwarzman happen to you. Exposure to China, new kinds of people, and what Matt was talking about. You know, he came in thinking he was going to go into, you know, doesn't mean he's not going to at some point in his career, but being open to the opportunity of what's going to happen. And if you're not, it's really not the right program for you, right? But I would say that even if you think you're trying to accelerate your career on a certain path, that this will, at some point during the year, disrupt that idea. So if you're open to that, I mean, it's going to accelerate it in the obvious ways, the people you're going to meet, the connections you're going to make, and also the education you're going to have about China and all kinds of other things. So that's obvious. But also this, the unexpected opportunities that will come up.
A related idea related to career acceleration and also to leadership, the previous question, Cordel, is it's as easy to do something big as it is to do something small. That's something Steve has talked about a lot and written in his book, but spending a year at Schwarzman College, that kind of got etched into my soul and became unforgettable. And how that's playing out in my life right now is, I'm pursuing a career as an athlete. And so I want to have all of the infrastructure in place to make myself, the best athlete I can be, the best coaches, strength trainers, nutritionists, all that stuff. As long as I'm putting in the effort to do that for myself, which is the small side of it, it's not that much extra effort to crank things up a notch and to try to build the infrastructure to provide better support services to dozens of high-level athletes across American speed skating and to impact the lives of thousands of youth skaters in speed skating. So if I put in a little extra effort, a little extra creativity, working with the coaches I'm already working with the trainers I'm already working with, we're putting together a program. The name of it is DASH, Developing Athletes for Speed Skating High Performance, that is working to totally revamp American speed skating. And again, that's the big picture thing. It's not that much more effort to do that than it is to do something small and be successful. So you can imagine if you're doing things that are big, that's also going to accelerate your career a bit more.
That's great. Well, so we've talked about a lot of big picture ideas. Let's kind of zoom in. We've got a lot of folks who are watching today who are, thinking about their applications and kind of finishing them up. So I wonder if the three of you could talk to us some about how you talked about leadership in your applications. We get a lot of questions where people say, I wasn't president of the student body, or I wasn't captain of the football team. And what we try to get across to them is, we don't care what label was pinned on you. We want to know what you did. Talk about what you did, because leadership isn't always a title. So I wonder if you could talk to us some about your reflection and your presentation of your leadership in your application and in your interview.
When in my essays, for example, you're very right, Cordel. I don't think you don't have to highlight the fact that you were a X, Y, Z. I genuinely wrote about the stories that I'd seen, how I'd seen a little 6-year-old die because he didn't have access to surgery, how I saw women die during a simple process of childbirth, and how that drove me to, launch a small startup of my own that is now scaled up and is in the National Health Plan of India. And about 7.3 million women have access to this device. So I spoke about, what I saw, how it impacted me, and what I did in whatever little ways I could. On my personal statements, for example, I wrote a story about my grandfather and, how he had to undergo multiple heart surgeries to survive. And, that in some ways had put in a financial burden on the family, and how that, how that story pushed me to work towards creating this larger systemic change within the public health system. And at some point, understand more about China. China was able to lift 800 million people out of poverty, provide health insurance to all of them. And how could we do it? How could I play a small part in doing so through the program? And so just to put it out there, write about stories that bring you to life, that portray you as a human being. Don't run behind titles. Don't run behind, big names, is what my genuine suggestion is.
Yeah, and just to echo a little bit of what Namit said, there's other places in the application where you're highlighting the titles you've had and the awards that you've won and all of that stuff. So really, really try to be human in those essays, and just be uniquely yourself. That's the best thing you can do.
Well, could you talk to us some about how you presented your leadership in the application?
Yeah. I think if I remember correctly, I spoke about some of the work I did at my college at St. Hugh's in Oxford. I think during my time there, I come to understand that not everyone was as focused on the post-Oxford plans as I was. And I kind of sensed that kind of uncertainty around graduating amongst loads of my kind of classmates. And so I put together essentially like a platform where people could connect with alumni from the college and connect with them and just get inspiration about, you know, what's there outside of Oxford. And I think this was something that was really helpful for a lot of students. I mean, Oxford is a very kind of strenuous place, and sometimes you don't have the time to scour the internet for all the internship opportunities. So the platform kind of simultaneously connected students with alumni and also kind of showcased them opportunities that were going and available to them at the moment. And I think that the personal statement and the leadership essays, or I think if the format has changed, there's still a really great way to just kind of share your story and share who you are. I mean, the application process, like there's no way you can sit down for an hour with every single person that applies to Schwarzman. So you really do have to show as much of yourself as you possibly can on the paper. And yeah, I guess my advice would be to think about the things that you're proud of, think of the things that have sparked joy in your school, in your internship, in your workplace, whatever it is, and communicate it boldly during the application.
Well, I'll ask one more question. I'll ask a zoom out big question now. What's one piece of big advice that you would have for somebody who is thinking about applying for Schwarzman Scholars? So maybe about the application process or about the experience, just any one piece of big advice you might have. Matt, would you like to start with that?
Sure. So this pertains probably more so to the leadership essay, but it's a useful question for framing all of the essays, which is think about what are all of the points along your path where you achieved something big, you completed an endeavor, but what are all the points along that where you could have stopped, or where if you would have been less creative or less skilled or less motivated, you would have given up? And what did you do at those critical turning points instead of giving up? Was it you used your intellect to creatively solve a problem? Or you just had like some raw motivation and you were going to bulldoze your way through a brick wall? Whatever happens at those key critical turning points, if you can identify those, those are the aspects of yourself that it's best to try to highlight in your application.
Well, I mean, what's one big piece of advice you have for our potential applicants?
I have two. For the application process, I would definitely say reach out to your friends and your family, people who you know and love. They see you sometimes better than you can see yourself. And they were incredible for me as sounding boards during kind of my application process. There are things that I maybe have downplayed and didn't think of highly, but they encouraged me on and, you know, really kind of rooted for me. So definitely get those that love you to look over your application. And then my second piece of advice for people who eventually do join the program is to, I think, as Amy has said a number of times, is just be very open-minded. I think I wouldn't change anything about how I did the program, but if I could do it again, I'd want to learn even more about China, do even more China-specific courses, go to even more Chinese kind of provinces. Like, I just want to do more and more of everything because it's such a unique experience. And yeah, literally once in a lifetime experience. So everything that's even a remote interest, pursue it.
Excellent. Naman, how about you? What's one piece of big advice you have?
Well, I have a couple. So first is, don't think twice, go out and apply it right now. You know, don't dive deeper into figuring out what your career would look like. Don't dive deeper into, you know, figuring out whether or not you'll make it. Open that application and press that submit button. It is a transformative experience of a lifetime. And I do not know how I can put it in words. So first, go out there and apply. And then second, to be very honest, be very genuine, right? When you're applying, don't, you know, and I'm not going to quote the name of a person, but remember that you sit across incredible people. I sat across the CIA director, David Petraeus. I sat across Steve Schwarzman, across Rob Garris, across an array of people who, you know, who will find out if you're bluffing. So don't do it. You know, be genuine, be honest, and just do it. I feel like, again, the application process itself is so immersive. It'll help you think through, right? It'll help you reflect upon who you are really as a person and where you really want to head. And again, you know, the interview is out of the world. Those are the 30 best and the worst minutes of my life, as I always say, you know, but do it, you know. it is out of the world. So go ahead and apply. And my final piece of advice is, in case you have any questions, I'm sure I can vouch for all of us here. Feel free to just drop us a message on LinkedIn or, drop us a note. I'm happy to guide in whatever way possible. I might not sit down and read your application, but if you want to talk about the program, learn more, I'm, a message away.
Well, thank you guys. So we're now 21 days away from the deadline. So all of our prospective applicants, check out all the details on our website. Please make sure to explore the resources on our YouTube channel. And as always, if you have any questions or would like to talk to a member of the admissions team, please reach out to us on admissions@schwarzmanscholars.org. We're so excited and we're looking forward to getting a chance to meet the people who apply on paper and then during interviews. This is our favorite time of year. We're so very excited about it. I'll now throw it to Amy to close us out with a few brief remarks of encouragement from the CEO.
Well, look, I don't think I could say anything better than the way what Namit said, which is, and we didn't pay him to say that, which is that you should apply. It will be the transformative experience of a lifetime. And as you can see from our 3 esteemed panelists, it'll be different for each and every one of you. And I was going to go into my advice, which I already gave you, and then Namit gave you again, which is, be open to the unexpected. That's what this experience is supposed to be about, whether it's about China, whether it's about the people you're going to meet. Whatever it is, you have no idea what it's going to be, but it's going to change your life and change your career. And so I want to thank these characters here for joining us today. And you can see there's just a range of experiences and interests and geographies represented here, and how the program did. We didn't go through a list of a Rolodex of scholars and think, oh, let's select 3 whose lives were changed. It happens to each and every one of the scholars that do end up coming to Schwarzman Scholars. So please apply. Thanks so much for joining the session today. And again, thank you so much to the 3 of you for being so generous with your time and giving such good advice. And once again, as Namit said, be authentic in your application, because that's what we want to know. We want to know you. We don't want to read your resume, as I always start my interviews with. Don't walk me through your resume. I've already read it. But be authentic about who you are and why you want to be part of this program. And not only what you will get out of the program, but what you will bring to the program as a human being. So thanks so much again today for joining us. And thanks, Cordel, for including me.
Amy, thank you for joining us. There never has been a more pressing need for global collaboration and understanding. You look on the internet, you read a news site, you look on cable news, and you see it and you see why. So in this current context of the world, we really are even more committed to the mission of Schwarzman Scholars than ever. Preparing people who have the potential to be young leaders to deepen understanding between China and the rest of the world. Right now, members of our alumni network, as you've met today, I guess for some people, and the current cohort are putting into effect incredible initiatives to have an impact, to help communities in need, to stay connected as a network, to stay informed, to put resources and the skills they acquired throughout their time in the program and as alumni to use. This is an incredible global community, and we're so very excited that you're thinking about applying, and we're even more so excited that you understand why it's an important time to apply. So thank you all for joining us today. We really enjoyed it. Thank you to Matt, Oliemi, Namit. We really appreciate it. Amy, thank you for co-hosting. And 21 days. We're looking forward to meeting everybody on paper. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. This was great.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Yep.